Thank you so much, Shani, and welcome to the session on auto-translation rules, or auto-translatables as they're sometimes called. Just a few slides again, and then we'll go back into MemoQ. All right, so auto-translatables and where to find them. You'll see the auto-translatable icon in the settings of your project, where you can see that green number 5, and actually that symbol behind it, that's also number 5 in Chinese or Japanese, depending. So what are auto-translatables? These are elements in the source text that need some kind of change, some kind of adaptation so that they can be used in the target text. So something needs to be changed. There is already an existing setup for auto-translatables, and that has to do with the number formats. And these are governed by the so-called numbers groups. And you might have seen them. If you check the settings, you will see that when you install MemoQ, there are these so-called numbers English group, French group, and so on, already existing in the auto-translatables lists. Now, to use them, so to convert number formats into the format that is needed for the translation language, you would just activate the group that you want to use. That means if you're translating into English, you would activate the English group, because then it would, when it recognizes a decimal number, it would suggest that the decimal number would need to then use a dot with instead of a comma, for example, or that large numbers use the comma to delimit the digits. If you're translating into German or into a language that uses the same system as the German language does, then MemoQ would suggest a comma for the decimal numbers and a dot for the larger numbers. The Swiss group would suggest the apostrophe for the larger numbers, and the French group, for example, would use a space. So depending on what language group you're translating into, you would select one of the settings that already exist. And now I just want to give you a sneak peek on what is actually behind these settings, because we can be very, very happy that we already have these and don't have to create them ourselves. Because for simply just recognizing numbers and changing the number format, this is the regular expression. I've just color marked it a little bit so that I can give you an introduction of what it actually does. We don't have to go into the details, but just so that you know that you can count yourself lucky that we already have this and don't have to do it ourselves. The green part would be to make sure that nothing is matched that doesn't belong to the number. The yellow part is the numbers in front of a delimiter, including a minus symbol if there is one. Then we have the delimiters in gray. Then we have digits that come after the delimiter. And then we have a group of making sure that nothing is matched after the digits after the delimiter that doesn't belong to the number. So that's the auto-translation rule for number formats. But what we want to do is we want to see where we can use these auto-translation rules with a little bit more simple things. So elements that are in the source text that we still need in some way for the target text, but that need to be adapted slightly. Examples could be that if you've been to the regular expression basics, you've seen this example already. So if you want to change the sequence of, for example, digits and symbols, we want to recognize the digits and we want to reuse the digits, but the symbol needs to go to a different place. Date formats with any kind of delimiters where the delimiter needs to change, or maybe even the sequence of the numbers need to change. Doesn't matter what the date format looks like, but you need to specify what's the pattern in the source and how do you want to reuse the parts in the target and what needs to be changed. Then there could also be something that only a part of the whole expression needs to be changed. We have this file name basically with an underscore en in the name, and in the translation that needs to change to something else. And then there is one last thing in the auto-translation rules that actually has nothing to do with regular expressions, at least not with regular expressions that you have to define yourself. That would be conversions. So if you want to convert from one measurement system into another, you can specify what kind of calculation needs to be done to get this different number, like from centimeters to inches in this case. Now, the name auto-translatables seems to suggest that MemoQ will do this translation automatically and on its own, and that's actually not the case. It does suggest how these things should be adapted, but then the translator needs to use them and needs to put them into their translation sentences. There are some automated actions that do use the auto-translatables where these can be exchanged automatically, like if you do the number-only segment pre-translation, and if a segment only consists of such an auto-translatable element, then yes, the conversion can happen right away. But if there's text around it, then the feature would not do anything. So auto-translatables, the name is a little bit misleading, but it helps you to change elements from the source to the system, how the target language uses it. So what can we do? We can do adaptations. That is, we're searching for a pattern with regular expression in the source. Whatever we want to keep, we put into a group. So we use the round brackets around the part we want to keep, and the rest can then change. For the change, we then use the content of the group by calling it up with the dollar symbol and the number of the group in the source pattern, and the rest that needs to be changed. I'll have some examples on that in just a moment. So for example, if I want to find all the digits followed by a percentage symbol, I have a regular expression \d for one digit, the plus for one or more digits. I put that into the round brackets because that's the number. When I find it, I want to reuse it. And then I also want to find it in combination with my percentage symbol. The suggestion that the auto-translation rules then give to the translator would be change the sequence of these elements. So show the percentage symbol first, maybe insert a space, and then show the number that was found, the digits, from the search pattern. Another thing that we can do is a custom list. So in this case, the client says whenever there is an underscore in a language ID, no matter what language ID that is, be it EN or FR or IT, in the translation into German, all of these need to look like this. They need to use the same number, same digits, but instead of the underscore, we use a slash. And instead of all these different language IDs, we always use the German language ID. So we're changing several things into just one thing. That would be a custom list. The other one would be a translation list, where each element needs to be changed individually. So in this case, everything that is underscore EN in the source text needs to appear as underscore ENU in the target. But if it's FR in the source text, it needs to be FRE in the target text. So that would be then a translation list, basically translating certain elements of the source into something else in the target. And then we have the conversions, where you can do mathematical operations, going from centimeters to inches or the other way around. You can also use Chinese and Japanese characters in there in the measurement units. You can do the degree centigrade to Fahrenheit. So most of these things are possible. A lot of people then ask me, oh, that's nice. So I can do also the currency conversions. Well, yes and no. Of course, you can you can do a mathematical operation to change one number into another number and one currency symbol into another. But as the currency, the exchange rates change every day, you would need to adapt your settings every day, because there is no automatic setting in the background that gets the latest exchange rate from the internet, for example. So this is something that, yes, it can be done, but no, it's not really feasible because it's not up to date usually. So that's the slides. Let's go into the actual text and what we want to do here. So I have some examples. The example from the slides where I have the digits and the percentage symbol. I have some date formats that I might want to change. I have the name of the document that I would like to change. I have some measurement units, all with millimeters, but as you can see, quite inconsistent in the source. Sometimes there is a space, sometimes not. Sometimes there's a non-breaking space, sometimes there's two regular spaces. In the translation, I would always like to suggest that the use of a regular space or a non-breaking space is required. So all of these things, these are my examples where I would like to create the auto-translation rules for. Let's start with the digits and the percentage symbol. I'll have to go to my settings, to the auto-translation rules, create a new one, and edit that. And then use regular expressions to do the pattern search and also the pattern replacement. So let's do the digits. We have \d for one digit with the plus symbol, several digits, and the percentage symbol. As I want to reuse the digits that I find, I'll put them into brackets, round brackets, as a group. Can add this. So this is going to be recognized in the source. How should that look in the target? I would like to have the percentage symbol first. Then I would like to have a space. And then I would like to have whatever is in the first group that was recognized in my source text. And the groups are called up with the dollar symbol and the number of the group. So if I have a longer expression and there are several groups, they would be numbered like 1, 2, 3 from left to right. So here that's number 1. Let's say add. There's a preview where you can copy some text in to make sure how that it really works the way you want it to. So let's take this off and say I have my 25%. To preview, that's how it's going to look like in my translation. Let's go back to the document. The nice thing is that MemoQ will mark these things up with a green background in the source text. And in the translation results list, you will now see what has been recognized and also how it should look like in the translation. It's easy to take over, double click or Control-1 to get it into your translation, or you choose the Control key and get a list of the things that you could take over from the source, either as it is or as it has been suggested how it should change. Another nice thing is that these auto-translatables can also be checked with the QA check. So you can check whether the conversions that you've suggested really have been used in the translation. Let's do the same thing for the dates. Let's go back here and add a date format. You might see this small RX button here. For those of you who've not checked this out yet, that's the regular expression assistant. And that has a cheat sheet of lots of different single regular expressions that you might want to use to build up your own. Or there's also a regex library where you can add your own expressions. So the ones up here, these are my own. The other ones are built in by MemoQ. So we could say we find something that expresses how the pattern looks like in the source. You can just click on it. And you can see it can be quite complex if you want to do it very specific and make sure that nothing other than a date format really is recognized. Of course, you can also start with a more simple setup and say I have some digits, I have a slash. A slash doesn't have a meaning in regular expression, so you can just put it in as a slash. The backslash is different, but the slash is okay. Then I need the same structure again, so I'll just copy it. So I have digit slash digits slash digits. I'll add this as a new expression. So 3 groups. Now I would like to have maybe the third group first. I'll have the international date. So group number 3, $3. I would like to have a dash. Then I would like to have $1 because that's in the American date, that's the month. And then another dash and number 2. Let's check. And there you are. The numbers or the digits have been reused to create something that now looks like more like the international date that I want to insert into my translation. For the next one, I don't want to use reuse everything. I only want to reuse this part, and the en should change. The docx, that's something that's going to stay as well. Just the en in between is going to be changed to de. So I'll have to make sure that I'm keeping the right parts and changing the other ones. So we have digits, underscore, and letters, then an underscore, and then the en. So let's do that kind of setup. We'll start with the digits. We have an underscore. Well, actually, let's take the round brackets off for now. So we have the digits, we have the underscore, we have capital letters, capital A to capital Z, and several of those. And we have another underscore. That's the part that's going to stay. That's what we want to reuse. So we put the round brackets around that whole part. That's our group number 1. After that, we have the en and the docx. And maybe the docx, that's something we want to reuse. We could also type it, but we can also use it as a group. So now we have 2 groups we want to reuse, and in between something that we want to change. So we add that to the list, and then say we want to have the first group, $1. After that, we want to see DE, and then we want to have the second group, $2. Add this, and let's take a look. So it's recognized as a whole in green, and it suggested that this is how it should change. Instead of the en, we have the de. And again, with regular expressions, there are so many different ways of doing this. So you can always find your own way of how to write this regular expression. It doesn't have to be the same as I'm doing it. Then the last one, where I would like to make sure that the translation always uses, for example, the non-breaking space. Now, here's a thing in these entry fields where you type in your regular expressions. I found that there's no way to use the keyboard to insert a non-breaking space. So I'll have to copy it in. So I'm going to put this one into my clipboard just by copying the non-breaking space so that I can later on put it into my regular expression because I can't type it in. So let's Control and C. So the pattern would be digits, 1 space, no space, several spaces, or non-breaking space. So no space, 1 space, or more spaces, and then the millimeters. That's what I want to find. Let's go back. So we have the digits. Then we have a space, \s, with the asterisk, meaning there could be no space, 1 or several. And then we have the for the millimeters. That's our pattern that we want to find. Again, we can add this. And in the translation, we would like to see the digits. So the group that is found here, we'll use the $1. Now I'm going to paste in the non-breaking space. Unfortunately, we can't see whether this is a regular space or a non-breaking space, but you'll see it later on when we go back to the document and see the results in the results list. And then the millimeters. Add that as the replacement and check. And now you can see that all the different numbers are suggested to have a non-breaking space between the digits and the measurement unit. So this is something that can also make it easier for the translator to take these things over and not having to manually fiddle around with these things. There are a lot of things that you can do. Let's go to the next one. This is basically the same as what we've seen with the millimeters. Again, we have no space or 1 space, several spaces, but we also might have different measurement units that we want to group together. So we could say, well, the measurement unit consists of the letters M and G and K. It's always the G in the end. So it could be just a G, it could be a K and a G, an M and a G. So you can be very specific with your regular expressions and write regular expressions for all the occurrences or for each and every one of the occurrences, or you can sort of combine it into one regular expression. Let's do that with this one. So we would do the following. We're looking for digits, followed by possibly a space, \s and the asterisk. And then there would be something like a group of different units that could come after it. I could be explicit and say, okay, it could be milligrams, then the pipe symbol, the vertical line, could be kilograms, another pipe symbol, and the grams. Make sure that you're using the right sequence here. So the larger expressions first, because if you put the G alone at the beginning, then it will always match the G, but nothing else, or it would not match anything. So depends on how you do the sequence. So be careful with that. So that could be one. And now, actually, no, I don't want to apply the changes. Oh, shoot. I'll have to type it again. Sorry. That is something I would like to just cancel this. I don't want to overwrite my previous expression, but MemoQ doesn't let me. It always asks to either confirm or take everything off. So let's do this one again. So we could do these different options that we have, or we could even make it more or shorter. We could say, well, there is a range of characters. It could either be an M or a K in front of the G. So it could be an MG or a KG. It could also be only a G. So that range M and K is optional. I'll put an asterisk here, which basically means if there is a combination of an M and a G, that's okay. If it's K and G, that's okay. If there's no M or K and just a G, that's also okay. So as you can see, there are always different ways of creating the same thing, but using different regular expressions. Now let's add this. And we want to reuse these things. We want to reuse the digits that we have found, and we want to reuse the measurement unit that we found. So two groups, group 1 and group 2. So we'll see $1, and then a space possibly, or a non-breaking space if you want to copy it in, and then $2. Well, let's see, I think I still should have the non-breaking space in the clipboard. Let's try. And go back here. Just the second one. So they're all recognized, and it's reusing the same measurement unit that it finds in the source, and it's inserting the non-breaking space. And basically all the other things that we see here work the same way by recognizing something that then has a space or no space, and then has some kind of measurement unit. Let's see something else. Adaptations. Well, actually, there are two ways of doing this kind of thing. So you could do it with the regular expressions like we've done just now, just create 3 different ones, for example, or we can later on do that with the translation lists. So again, we would, in this case, en in the source needs to be changed to 0, 1 in the target. And if it is es, it needs to become a 0, 2, and so on. So this is something that we can do. Let's check this one. Edit. And so we have a group of, in this case, capital letters. It starts with something from the range of A to Z. There could be several, so I'll put a plus. After that, we had an underscore. And then there was a range of digits, 0 to 9. And these digits, now let me show you that file again. That's I think that was number 2. Because sometimes we have to be very careful. These digits here, they sometimes have a dash in between and sometimes have a slash in between. If they have 2 dashes or not, that doesn't really matter. But we need to make sure that all the different delimiters that can come up here, they are in the pattern that we're looking up. So our pattern is a range of capital letters, then an underscore, and then a range of digits plus some other things like dashes and slashes. So we'll just put them into the range as well, a slash and a dash, and then a plus symbol behind that square bracket, meaning there could be any kind of combination of these digits, slashes, and dashes. And then the next part would be, after that we have the underscore en. So we have one part that stays the same, and this underscore en then changes to 0, 1. Actually, we could include the underscore into the group as well because it's going to stay the same, but it's up to you. Then we add this, and then we say we want to reuse whatever is in these round brackets, $1. And after that, we want to have an underscore and 0, 1 instead of the en. So now everything is recognized in green, and it comes up with the same combination of digits and numbers and underscores and dashes and whatever. And instead of the en, it suggests I should write the 0, 1. So if it's not too many different ones, I can do regular expressions for each and every one of them. But as we'll see with the translation lists, you can also do that in one regular expression in the auto translation rules. Now, the next thing I would like to show is the custom list. And here it says, in the translation, all language IDs need to be changed to something else. So whatever it is in the source, en or es or it, and you can see it's now being recognized because another regular expression recognizes that kind of combination. So I could actually reuse that later on. But so that we don't get confused, I'll just create a new rule and take this one off. That's also something, if you have too many rules in your auto translations, you might be surprised of what kind of things are being matched that you didn't really expect there would be a match for it. So sometimes it makes sense to make sure that you don't have too many things in your auto translation rules, or have several so that you can uncheck them and check and test which ones are getting the right patterns. So let's go in here. To create or to use a list of things, we'll have to create the list first. The list needs a name, and the names always have to be written with a hash symbol in front of the name and after the name. So we'll do a hash symbol, then give it a name. Let's say that this is language ID, and another hash symbol. So that's the name of my list. Then I can create the list itself. Say, okay, inside of that list, I want to recognize things that look like this. There's an en, there could be an es, there could be an it. And now I can use the name of this list inside of my regular expression to actually match things in my document. So we'll go to the first tab. Just remember how it's written, language ID with the hash symbols. And now I'm going to create my regular expression. Again, it is a range of capital letters, A to Z. Could be several with a plus symbol. Then there was an underscore. Then there was a range of digits, 0 to 9. Again, several. And there could also be a dash. So we'll have to put the dash in here as well. and then there was another underscore. So that's the part that's going to stay the same. I'll put the round brackets around this, beginning and end. And after that, we had something from the custom list. So the EN or the ES or the IT, whatever is in the list. So that's where I'm going to put the name of the list, and I'll have to put it into brackets as well. So the round brackets and the name of the list. So now I'm looking for a combination of these letters and digits and underscores, followed by something from the list. And what I want as a replacement, I want to keep all the letters and digits and underscores and things, but instead of something from the list, I always want to see the DE for German, because I'm translating into German here. So I'm using the group $1, and I'm adding the DE for what I want in exchange for the things from the list. And now you can see whenever it's EN, or it is ES in the end, or IT, it always suggests the same thing, but now it always suggests the DE at the end. So that is if you want to change several things from the source in always the same thing in the target. Of course, there are different applications of that. So the next one would be, for example, whenever there is a version number together with a product name, like this 6.2 or that X-shape 4.3, that is something that in the translation I would like to keep the name, but the version number should look like this. Instead of the dot, I would like to have a slash. Now, of course, we could now go and say, well, wherever we have numbers like 4.3, 6.2, we change it to 4/3, 6/2. But the issue is that we also have numbers that are not version numbers, that are decimal numbers, and they need to change differently. So that's why we need to make a list of the names of the products. And then we can say whenever such a product name comes up and is followed directly by digit.digit, then we want to change it. If there is just a regular digit with a dot and another digit, then we don't do anything to it. And you can see that sometimes you have to look really closely at your documents so that you don't match the wrong things with your regular expressions. So for that, we would need to set up another list. And I've just opened the Word document that has all these names inside so that I don't have to type them out. I'll just move them to the other screen, and I'll create my product name list. So again, I'll have a custom list. I'll call it product, add this. And now I'm going to copy over the different names of my products. This one. So that later on I can just use the name of the list and say if anything from this list comes up in my document, followed by this thing that looks like a version number. I think that's it. So that's my list of my product names. Now let's go back to the rules and say, if I have something from the product list, so I'm putting in the name of the list, I have to put it into round brackets, otherwise the regular expression doesn't work here. So this one is followed then by possibly a space, \s, and the asterisk again, because I don't know if there is a space or not, or maybe several spaces. You never know. And the next thing would be that I have this digit and then the dot and then the digit. As I want to reuse the digits, I'll have to put them in groups as well. So I have a group for the digit before the dot, \d. Then I have the actual dot. To search for a dot in regular expressions, we'll have to escape it with the backslash, the so-called escape character, because a dot usually means any character. If we search for a dot itself, we'll have to put the backslash in front, and then another backslash D for the second digit. So that's what I'm looking for. And how do I want to exchange this? I want to reuse the name from the product list. So from the first group, $1. Maybe I want to have a space then. And then I want to reuse the digits. So $2 and then a slash instead of the dot. Slash and $3. And let's check. I think that's this one. Yeah. Now it should come up with the names and the slashes instead of the dots. And all the other decimal numbers, they are not touched because they're not in combination with one of the product names. So I'm really only matching the things where there are version numbers and not where there are decimal numbers in general. So that's what you can do with the custom lists. Now let's move on to the translation lists. And here it's changing one thing to another and doing that individually. So here we say whenever there is an EN, it should become ENU. ES becomes ESP. IT becomes ITA. So that all of these can be recognized with one regular expression, but these endings are being changed individually. And again, you can see that because I'm using the same kind of combination between letters and digits, it is recognized already by one of my regular expressions. So be careful which regular expression is actually matching what. Let me go inside of my auto translation rules, and I'll just take these off. All these rules are in the sample files that I sent to you, so you can try it out yourself. You don't have to create them yourself. So we'll do the regular expression. First of all, we do the translation list. Translation pairs. Again, same thing as with the custom list. The list needs a name with the hash symbols. And let's say that's the ID. It can be very short. And then we add the source and the destination. So this, how it looks like in the source, how it's going to look like in the target. So EN for the source and ENU for the target. Add this. So you can do this for almost anything. I even know people who use this like a small machine translation system without using a plugin for machine translation, but just putting in term pairs or expression pairs that they want to use. And you can, I wouldn't say misuse it, but use it for a lot of different things. So this would be the group that I need. Then I'll go back to the actual rules and say, okay, how does the expression look like where I have these names inside? Again, I have my capital letters, A to Z, and followed by digits, 0 to 9, and maybe a slash, a dash, and an underscore. So if you have a range of characters that can come up in combination, you can also put them into the same square bracket pair. So you don't have to put them separately, because you never know if the expression starts with capital letters always. Sometimes it starts with a digit. Then it would be hard to create one regular expression that really catches everything. And so we're just saying, well, if there is a combination that can contain either only capital letters or capital letters and digits or only digits together with dashes and underscores, if you find such a combination, that's what I'm going to match. Don't forget the plus, because this whole range only matches one of the characters that are defined here. If you use the plus, it can be a combination of one or more of these characters. Then we had an underscore, and all of that is the thing that we want to reuse. So we put it into round brackets. And after that, we had one of the elements of our translation list. So we put in the list, again with the round brackets and the name of the list, the hash symbol, name of the list, and the second hash symbol. So that's matching the things in the source. Now, how do we want to have this in the target? We would then use the $1 to reuse the letter number combination, and then we use $2. Whatever the translation of the found IDs are in my translation list. So if I find EN, it will change to ENU. If I find IT, it changes to ITA. Now let's try this. And there we go. The EN changes to ENU. The ES changes to ESP. So with one regular expression, we have actually covered several combinations of things, how they need to change. You can do it individually, like we did with the EN changing to 01 and then FR changing to 02. But you can also do it within one expression if you use this type of translation list. I also have another one where, for example, you can use also other characters in other languages. It doesn't have to be all European languages, of course. And for this, let me check, that's the translation pairs. I already have set that up. Translation list number 2. Take a look. So here, for example, I have 2 different lists defined, one for the Chinese measurements, where I say if there is millimeters in the source, then the same number is reused, but the measurement unit should use Chinese characters. There is another one for legal terms. So that means however the word article comes up in the source, I could even add the plural ones, it should always use the same character in Chinese. So this is something that you can do with these translation lists with any type of language. The rule then says, if I have a digit, followed by possibly a space, followed by something from my measurement list, and there I have the \b in the end. A \b is a boundary. That means it has to stop at this point. There needs to be either a white space or a punctuation mark. So there cannot be any other letters. Otherwise, it would be matched into that expression maybe as well. And then I'm reusing that $1, $2. So I'm reusing the digits, and I'm reusing whatever I have in the translation list for the things found in the source. The same goes for the legal terms. If I find one of the words in my legal term list, it should be replaced with whatever has been set in the translation list. Of course, you can also do that with term base, but just to show you what kind of possibilities these auto-translation rules have. So for that, we can recognize the digits and the measurement unit, and then have the suggestion of how that should look like in Chinese. And here is something where I have the article several times inside, and it should always use the same character in Chinese. So that is something that you can put in here. So that's the auto-translatables. And the auto-translatables are used in different places. So not only in the translation results list, as you've seen, if I click in here and press the control key, you get all the different things that you could take over, like tags from source to target. It's also used in the number only segments in the preparation. If you do the populate number only segments, there you can use the auto-translatables as well. So if a segment only contains an auto-translatable, then this process would automatically convert it in such a way as what you've set up in the auto-translation rules. And it's also used in the fragment assembly. So if you do a pre-translation and you're using the fragment assembling, so taking the source sentence but exchanging all the known parts, like terms from the term base, there could also be a setup where you say also the auto-translatables are being automatically switched to what they need to look like in the target. As far as I know, it's not used for the match patch because that only changes text parts. But for the number-only segments and the fragment assembly, it is being used. Now, the last thing that we can do with the auto-translation rules would be these conversions. And they don't need regular expressions. Well, actually, let's go to the conversions. I have them set up already. So here you can set up, for example, if you want to go from degree centigrade to degree Fahrenheit. So the source shows a degree symbol and the C for centigrade. In the translation, you then want to see the degree symbol and the F for Fahrenheit. And then you have the calculation of what you need to do to the number that you find that is associated with this symbol. So here you have the calculation that would then give you the number that's being suggested to the translator. Unfortunately, MemoQ at the moment doesn't do any rounding. So instead of going from the 68 degree Fahrenheit to 20 degree centigrade, it shows 19,9999999 something. It's a little bit unfortunate at the moment, but I do know that a lot of people have asked for that. So hopefully someday we'll have a rounding factor in here as well. So this is something, if you have this switched on and you go to segments that have that kind of information, you will see that the calculation now has been done for the translator. They don't need to sit down with a calculator and create these numbers. But as you can see, there is no rounding. And unfortunately, if you now switch on the QA check and check for the auto translation rules, if instead of the 19,999 something, you use the 20 degrees centigrade, you will get an error message from the QA check, of course. But yeah, there's so many great things in MemoQ, and there are some small things that don't work as we expect them. So let's just check the QA settings. If you do want to run the QA check with the auto-translatables, just check the box so that the auto-translation rules will then be used for checking whether the translator has used them as they were set up or not. That's basically it, what I wanted to show on the auto-translation rules. Let's see if we do have any questions that we need to answer. Let's see. Well, there are some answers already in there. So there's another one. What general guidance can you offer to users or LSPs for developing specifications to share with experts who might be developing rules for them? Well, for these people to develop the rules for you, you need to provide them with the patterns. So take a good look at the documents that you have and try to find the patterns that you want to, for example, either convert into something with the auto translation rules or make into tags. So the experts who create the rules, they would need to know, okay, it starts with a number or with a digit, then there can be one or two or three or several uppercase letters. There's always an underscore in there. So that kind of thing. So these kinds of patterns, that is something that people need to create these rules for you. So how is using translation rules different to adding something to the term base? Good question. A lot of these things that you can do them in both. As I've shown, you can say if there's one word in the source, it needs to be translated in a certain way in the target. Now, the regular expressions are always good if parts of the things that you're looking for change. So if it's not always the same word, or always the same combination of letters and digits and underscores, but if these things can change, then the pattern matching with the regular expression and the auto translation rules is more flexible than putting all the different possibilities into a term base. But you're right, some of the things can also be done through a term base. Yeah, you could do a regex to identify numbers in need of rounding. Yes, of course, you could do so. And find all the numbers that have at least 3 digits after the dot. Yes, you can do that. So there are quite a lot of things that you can do with regular expressions. And I find it takes up quite a lot of time, but it can be fun if you like doing that kind of stuff. The thing is that if you go into regular expressions, you should keep at it, because if you only do it like every 2 months or every half year, you probably forget most of the things that you've learned the last time. But in that, definitely, I would say the regex assistant can be very, very helpful. So do check it out and create your own library of things that you want to, or that you have developed and that you might want to reuse. So if I say ending tags of HTML, that's how it should look like. I don't have to redo it again and again. I'll just save it in this list in my library. And then I can, as you can see, it always has a description that you can put in yourself. And then you can see the regular expression and test it out with some sample text. All right. Any more questions, or did I overlook anything? And thanks, Kevin, for answering so many questions yourself, helping me quite a lot. Shani, can you see anything that I've overlooked?
I think we are pretty much covered.
I think so too.
Yeah, great.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your attention.